Now, Deputy Mayor Appiah, we recognize you for your 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member Jackson Lee, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Lindsay Appiah. I serve as Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice for the District of Columbia, a position I was nominated to by Mayor Muriel Bowser and confirmed by the D.C. Council. Serving the residents and visitors of the district in this capacity is the honor of my life. By way of background, I've served for 11 years in district government, all of which have been in public safety and justice, including as general counsel and interim director of the D.C. Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, the district's juvenile justice agency. I want to acknowledge the witnesses who are sharing their perspectives and experiences at today's hearing, including Ms. Richards and Mr. Pemberton, who serve in agencies under my supervision. On behalf of the mayor and the 700,000 residents of the District of Columbia, I express gratitude for their service and appreciate they're able to be here to share information on the challenges we're facing in the district. Percents and numbers provide critical context. However, we can never lose sight that each statistic on a website or read during a hearing is more than a number. The reality is there are no victimless crimes. We recognize the harm and trauma many have experienced, acknowledge our responsibility to respond soberly and urgently, and vow to work tirelessly to make our city safer, stronger, and a place of collective flourishing. As Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, I provide direction, guidance, support, and coordination for the district's 12 public safety agencies and the D.C. National Guard to develop and lead cross-cluster, interagency public safety initiatives to improve the quality of life in district neighborhoods. The missions of these agencies are dynamic and complex. Each plays a critical role in the overall health and functioning of our public safety and justice ecosystem. We call our system an ecosystem because an ecosystem is a complex, interconnected system that's dependent upon each part for its health and optimal functioning. Our interdependent system is centered around prevention, intervention and enforcement, accountability and rehabilitation. Prevention includes those non-law enforcement programs, services, and strategies aimed at decreasing the incidence of individuals committing violent crime and in reducing the community conditions that lead to high rates of violent crime in communities in our city. It encompasses our work on providing coordinated delivery of wraparound services and connecting our residents and their communities to care. Intervention enforcement are primarily law enforcement strategies led by MPD. MPD does currently have the lowest force strength it's had since 1999. We're making investments to ensure that MPD can recruit and retain officers while also making investments in technology that will enhance our ability to efficiently and effectively solve cases and bring much needed and deserved justice for victims in our city. Accountability includes the criminal justice system, which we recognize is vital. Holding people appropriately accountable for their behavior is critical to future deterrence. Currently, the D.C. Superior Court has 11 judicial vacancies. Our ecosystem has many pain and pressure points, but the district is investing significant resources into a multi-pronged public safety approach that invests in law enforcement, prevention efforts, youth programming, re-entry, and rehabilitation. Another complexity is the uniqueness of the district's criminal justice system structure, one that's a mix of local, federal, and independent agencies, most of which are not under the authority of the mayor. We need all of our colleagues in these agencies to match the commitment in the district government to not just combat crime, but to approach the work with the belief that we can prevent the next crime and prevent someone else from becoming a victim. The Mayor Bowser has also maintained we have to have a policy environment that supports appropriate accountability. In the district, we are leaders in systemic reform. This is certainly true in the criminal justice space, where we lead in pushing bounds of what is possible to achieve equal justice for all under the law. We can and should be proud of our progress, but we must not be so proud that we're unwilling to critically evaluate our reforms and adjust when unintended consequences are leading to harmful outcomes, which is why in May, Mayor Bowser sent to the Council for introduction the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act of 2023, a common sense set of policy proposals aimed at providing additional tools across our system to combat crime. The D.C. Council recognized this as well and passed the Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act, which incorporates several provisions from the Safer, Stronger Act. We know more must be done, and I echo what the mayor testified in May. Our public safety agencies here in D.C. and across the country need the support of Congress. I'm happy to answer questions about more ways that Congress can help to support all of the efforts that we've described in D.C. government to actually lower crime in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And now, Chair recognizes Mr. Abt for your 5 minutes.
Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member Jackson Lee, and members of the subcommittee, I am Thomas Apt, founding director of the Center for the Study and Practice of Violence Reduction, also known as the Violence Reduction Center, or VRC, located at the University of Maryland, College Park. The VRC's mission is simple. We seek to save lives by stopping violence using science. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today on victims of violent crime in the District of Columbia. This issue is personally and professionally important to me. I live here in the district. I was first exposed to violence while teaching at Roosevelt High School, where one of my students was shot and killed. I fought crime in courtrooms in New York City while working as a local prosecutor. I helped start anti-violence initiatives as a senior federal and state government official. Most recently, I have studied the issue of violent crime while working in academia. Violent crime in the United States should not be a partisan issue. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, violence surged around the nation. It rose in urban, suburban, and rural areas. It rose in red states and in blue states. It rose in cities run by Republicans and in those led by Democrats. Recently, rates of violent crime have started to decline. Again, they are decreasing in both red and blue jurisdictions alike. While violence is falling in most cities around the country, that is unfortunately not the case here in the district. As of this past Tuesday, violent crime is up 40% compared with the same time last year and up 30% compared to the same period in 2019 before the pandemic began. Crime has been falling steeply in the district for the past 30 days, but no one should be satisfied with that. Why is crime rising here while falling nationally? We need to acknowledge that this is a complicated question that is hard to answer with certainty. Nationally, our best answer is that violence surged during the pandemic due to the pandemic, unrest following the murder of George Floyd, and a massive surge in legal gun sales. As we get farther from those factors, violence across the country seems to be slowing. Locally, we need to understand that Washington, D.C. is unique. The Metropolitan Police Department is one of more than 20 law enforcement agencies operating in the jurisdiction. Prosecution is split between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Office of the Attorney General, and judges are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. There is no other jurisdiction in the nation that is jointly administered in this way. If there's one thing I know after more than 25 years in this field, it's this. Reducing crime and violence is a team sport. If individual players do not play well together, the team will not succeed. Collaboration is key. Collaborating is hard in any jurisdiction, but it is especially hard here in the district due to its unusual local federal structure. That is no excuse. The district can and should do better in communicating, collaborating, and executing its anti-violence strategies. It is not easy, however, and Congress can help the city in several concrete ways. I'll mention just a few here. Every criminal justice system requires the sharing of information to function. Here in the district, however, the Privacy Act of 1974 prohibits federal agencies from disclosing critical information to local agencies. Congress could amend the Privacy Act to enable the effective sharing of information. By the start of 2024, the district's crime lab will have been without accreditation for nearly 3 years. The city needs and deserves a first-rate lab. Congress could support accreditation by appropriating funding for the lab and for external testing in the interim. And the district, as you heard, is currently struggling with numerous judicial vacancies. Congress could pass the District of Columbia Courts of Judicial Vacancy Reduction Act and apply a 60-day congressional review period to D.C. nominees and remove the requirement that the Senate hold hearings and vote on these nominations. None of these actions are likely to garner headlines, but they would make a difference in terms of safety for D.C. residents. They're all nonpartisan and things that members of both parties should be able to agree on. More broadly, just over a year and a half ago, when rates of violent crime across the country were at their peak, I urged this committee to put aside partisanship and support $6 billion in federal funding for evidence-informed anti-violence strategies carried out by local community-based organizations and local law enforcement agencies. That funding and those strategies are still sorely needed today in the district and around the nation. Then as now, we must remember that when it comes to violent crime, It is about solving a deadly serious problem, not winning an abstract argument. It's about emphasizing evidence over ideology. And it's about bringing people together, not pulling them apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abt, for your testimony. And now the chair recognizes Mr. Sobolewski for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Biggs and Ranking Member Jackson Lee, for the opportunity to address the subcommittee today. While this didn't occur in D.C., I'd first like to honor and recognize my father-in-law, who was shot and killed in Jacksonville, Florida, on December 4th, 2022. I'm going to discuss my experience, though, as a victim of violent crime in the District of Columbia. On December 16th, 2020, I made a series of mistakes that almost cost me my life. Some may say it is victim blaming, but the reality is crime exists. And if you're not careful in violent cities like D.C., you may end up just as another statistic. Shortly after 5 p.m. on December 16th, I left my apartment on N Street in Shaw, just a short walk from the White House. I was headed to get groceries, and I did not realize I would soon face a loaded barrel. Just as I began walking, I noticed a man acting suspiciously. He was looking over at me across the block, and I told myself nothing was wrong, and that nothing bad was going to happen to me. After all, the street was busy. What could go wrong? I turned down the block and I headed towards the grocery store, and I checked behind, and there he was, still eyeing me. He followed my direction. Alarmed, I noticed a couple walking just behind me, and behind them, the would-be criminal. I thought to myself, don't worry, there are people right behind me, it's okay. A few moments pass, and I look again, and the couple's nowhere to be seen, and the man is quickly approaching. Before I could think, he was next to me, asking for money, politely said no, and kept walking, without realizing he had pulled a gun. The criminal stepped in front of me and stated, "You know what it is," before aiming a pistol at my face and pressing it against my forehead. I almost didn't believe it, but then reality set in, and I thought I was going to lose my life to a criminal on the street. He sat me down. I'll never forget our interaction, line by line. He told me, "Do what I say, and you ain't gonna die tonight." All I could hear is, "You're gonna die tonight." And that my mom would have to come down to D.C. to identify my body on some cold street in Washington, D.C. I remember looking into his eyes and seeing no life, no thought, no empathy, just evil. During the entire interaction where he demanded property after property from me, his finger laid on the trigger while the pistol pointed directly at my head. I fortunately concealed my phone. While I was foolish not to hand it over, it expedited my ability to call for help. I remember the last words out of his mouth, muffled behind his COVID mask. "All right, you did good tonight. You ain't gonna die." I thought, well, this is where he shoots me. He stood me up and told me to walk, and I did. After a few steps, I turn around and I can see him starting to run. I repeatedly told myself, "Mitchell, you have your phone, call 911. I took cover behind a parked car and called exactly who you would want to respond in that situation, the police. Within minutes, squad cars lined 10th and N. I'll never forget seeing the siren lights come and thanking God for the police. A young female officer responded immediately, and I knew I was safe and that my life was spared. While I'm trying to remain in my 5 minutes, I'd like to note that after the arrest, in coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., my criminal went to trial. I gladly and passionately wrote a victim impact statement. I pleaded with the judge not to give a lenient sentence, as this man would commit worse crimes than what he did to me. The judge proceeded to give my criminal 24 months and suspended a year of his sentence because the judge believed his judgment was still forming. This light sentence was given despite my criminal robbing 6 victims and 2 businesses. That's right, 1 year for multiple armed robberies. Within weeks of my criminal's release, he would go on to rob 2 more people at gunpoint. And I would only find this out because I was reading the D.C. Weekly Arrests. We'll never be able to eradicate violent crime completely, but we can take action to ensure that it happens less frequently. Today, D.C. has the highest amount of homicides in almost 20 years. It is short 400 police officers, with the average homicide suspect having 11 prior arrests. I implore the subcommittee to understand that policing, prosecuting, and most importantly, incarceration works. Violent crimes should not be dealt with lightly. How many more stories do we have to read about entirely preventable tragedies? Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sobolewski, for your compelling testimony. We appreciate you being here. Mr. Jablonski, I understand you have a video that you wish to show to begin with.
Yes, please.
Yes, I recognize Mr. Jablonski for his 5 minutes, and we will show that video to begin.
Is the 5 minutes running, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it's running. Mr. Jablonski.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Lee. As horrific as that video is, what happened after was even worse. He was arrested. We found out he was a DoorDash driver, and no reason why he acted that way. Still no reason. Within 10 days of him being arrested, after numerous conversations with the DA office saying that I would do anything they needed to not plead this down, there was numerous eyewitnesses. There's a loaded 9mm, it's kind of hard to see there, that was pointed at my son. Not only was it loaded, there was one in the chamber. When I knocked it out of his pants, luckily it didn't go off because it could have killed someone. The DA told me that they had to take into account their resources and my resources, and that they would plead this down to a attempted assault with a dangerous weapon and illegal possession of a firearm. When I challenged them as to why they would do that and how does that take into account the endangerment of a minor, I was told that DC does not have a law for endangerment of a minor. After all that, I asked, okay, well, what's the sentencing guidelines you're asking for? 12 to 18 months. I went to the sentencing date. He was released on his own recognizance, basically. Went to the sentencing date, made a victim impact statement, and without a doubt in my mind, if I didn't do that, his attorney was asking for a divergence, and he probably wouldn't released. So out of this entire situation, I now have bad publicity for my own business because people now are worried that there's somebody on the street walking around with a gun because it's 2:30 in the afternoon. People are now telling me, well, I'm hesitating about ordering from DoorDash, which maybe hurts DoorDash, but also hurts the small businesses that support and sell through DoorDash. And then on top of everything else, he gets 8 months, and I'm left with explaining to my 5-year-old that why I had to fight this man, and my 5-year-old tells me when I drop him off at school every day to be safe. I understand. I'm born here, been in the bar industry for 25 years. I've seen the craziest things you can imagine. In the last 2-3 years, the brazenness of the violent acts that are going on in the city, but just around in general, have gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. And now that I've been through the whole process from start to finish, you could enact whatever law you want. We could have 1,000 new gun laws. We could have 1,000 new police officers. You could throw millions at this DA's office. If nobody's going to do their job and prosecute and hold people accountable, what's the point? Thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jablonski, for your testimony.